our country lately, there has been some civil unrest. We've seen it in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I want to give to you what I think is the anatomy of civil unrest in our society. There is an agenda that brings about what our nation saw in Charlottesville last Saturday, and I think has already seen over and over again, and is going to continue to see again and again, the anatomy of civil unrest. Here's how I think it works. There is a leftist group that throws a grenade out there. There is a leftist agenda that is at the bottom of almost every degree of civil unrest in Western society today. The left plants the bomb. The left puts the bait. And this is what they do. Now, when the left puts their agenda out there, there's always then someone on the right, typically the far right, who will respond. Sometimes, in fact, even maybe many times, the response comes from far right crazies. I think in our audience anyway, most of you aren't leftist crazies, and most of you aren't rightist crazies, but there are crazy people out there, Rosie O'Donnell and Governor Duke in Alabama or Louisiana and all that. There's crazy people out there. So the left people put the agenda out there. The right wing crazies respond to the agenda. Then the left goes crazy. I can't believe these right wingers. Oh, what bigots they are, what hypocrites they are. And they come out and say, we've got to stop this. We're going to have a protest. And so there's one or two on the right, or in this case, 200 on the right. And on the left, they'll gather together their forces of hundreds and maybe thousands and all the George Soros money behind it, and they'll start paying people to protest, and they'll get a big crowd of people out there saying it's unconscionable what is happening in our society. And so then the left will go crazy, and they'll have their protest of response, and all the right then is demonized as the alt-right. And anyone who's conservative must be one of these right-wing crazies. They must be the alt-right. And now, in order to amend the situation, the right, that is those who are conservative, they must grovel in sackcloth and ashes, get down and eat dirt and repent of their ways. And when they do that, the left will say, more. You haven't groveled enough. You haven't repented enough. This is the anatomy of civil unrest. Can I break that down for you in a very simple way? The left puts the agenda. The far right responds. The left brings out the army of unbelief, of shock and protest. All of the right is lumped into those few crazies that responded to the leftist agenda that was there in the first place. The right bows down and they grovel, and then the left demands more groveling until we get our way down to the last cent. You are going to grovel. And that's the way it works. I've seen it on a small scale. We've seen it on a big scale. In fact, just a number of weeks ago, we had a left-wing crazy who was out in front of our church protesting Vacation Bible School. Bible camp is ISIS, Baptist brainwashing, all of these signs and banners that he had as the little children were coming in to learn about Jesus. He had his banners. Guess what happens? Here comes a far-right winger, not even associated with our church. He drives by. He sees it. Guess what he says? I'll get a bigger banner. I'll make a 20-foot by 802-foot banner, and I'll hold it up, and I'll block his. Oh, now this begins to happen. What am I supposed to say? No, don't do that. That's what the left expects me to say. Don't get out there and give any other opinion because it'll just cause a scene. All he wants is attention, and we're not supposed to respond in any way. Now, when the big banner comes out, by the way, he didn't bring the banner. He just threatened to bring the banner. And when the big banner comes out, then, of course, all, begins to happen. Now, in a way that it did happen, I can tell you, is that many far right-wing people, when they drive by and see the Baptist brainwashing, it makes them mad. And might I say, rightfully so. Because ISIS and Vacation Bible School, those terms do not even belong in the same universe to anyone who is using their brain cells. We ought to be mad at that kind of thing. So, some right-winger stops by. They stopped, as happened many times right out here in front of our church, and they're ready to have a fist fight. Now, when they're ready to have a fist fight, and I tell you, it came very, very close on a number of occasions during that incident. When they're ready to have a fist fight, guess what the leftist snowflakes does? Looks to the Baptist preacher and says, "You're going to come to my aid, aren't you? Aren't you a real Christian? Aren't you going to defend me against this guy?" Guess what this right-wing pastor says? "You're a big boy. Fight your own battles." See, this is what the left wants to do every time. Bait it and then be in mocked offense when it comes and expect everyone else to come to their aid. You remember when you were growing up, maybe you were this child, but do you remember a child taunting a dog? And the child, holds the hot dog out there and pulls it away and holds it out there and pulls it away and holds it out there and pulls it away. And eventually the dog goes and acts like a dog and he bites it off. And cuts the kid hand. He goes home crying. And you're trying to help the kid because he's bleeding. But inside you're saying, he had it coming to him. Right? This is the scene of civil unrest in our world today. Now, I think, that's my opinion is, I think it's time for the leftists to be told race baiting is racism. And I am convinced that the left is the most racist group in our society today. And they put the race bait out there knowing it's going to bring a response. And I think they have to be told in no uncertain terms, you're racist when you do that. Race baiting is racism. And I think it's also time to be told, for the leftists to be told, the right does not have to agree with you. In fact, I'll tell you what I think of leftists. I think you are potty-mouthed crybabies with destructive opinions. That's what I think. And you're not the only one in the house who has the right to be offended. Others can get offended too. So that's what I'd tell the left. Now, it's time for the right to understand some things too, and that is you don't have to cower in fear over name-calling. Because the truth is that the left hates you, and they're going to hate you regardless of what you do. And if whatever position you take, they're going to hate you. And so your groveling is not going to do any good. We've already seen it. Grovel, we expect you to grovel more. We expect you to grovel in capital letters. We expect you to grovel in sackcloth and ashes. And it just never comes to the end. In fact, the leftists will not stop demanding that the right repent until socialism is the economic reality, because socialism is their ultimate goal. Now, the only way for socialism to come about is for the right, first of all, to bow down and take it, and for then the left to bring about socialism, they've got to bring about communism. They know that communism is the only road to their social utopia. The problem is the world has never lived through communism to get to their socialist utopia. So I think it's just time for us to kind of figure out that there is an anatomy of civil unrest, and that, my friend, is unfortunately not going to go away. That is my opinion. I'm Dr. Randy White.